had been counting the days, marking them off in neat boxes on a calendar pinned above my desk. Every paycheck, every overtime hour, every investment I'd carefully nurtured over the years had led to this moment. At 36, I could finally say the words aloud, "The house was mine," paid in full. When I told my father, I expected pride, perhaps even a rare smile from the man who had always measured worth in property and permanence. Instead, Roderick Calloway threw his head back and laughed, a low, dismissive sound that rattled in my chest. "Great," he said, still grinning, though his eyes were cold. "Now, pack your bags, your brother's moving in." For a second, I thought I had misheard him. The papers were still warm from the bank's stamp, tucked carefully in my bag. I had imagined this day as a gift for our family, a way of honoring my mother's memory. But across the table, Malcolm was already leaning back in his chair like a king surveying new land. "So I'll take the master," he said lightly, as if my years of sacrifice were nothing more than a transaction completed on his behalf. His tone carried the same ease he had known all his life. Our father's shield had always been his. My mouth went dry. I wanted to argue, to shout the truth into the room until the walls echoed it back. But instead, I sat still, the humiliation washing over me in waves. Every long night, every choice to deny myself so this house could stand it all seemed to collapse in that instant. The pride I had carried into the room was gone, leaving only the sharp edges of betrayal, and the first spark of something harder forming inside me. The sting of my father's laughter dragged me back to memories I had tried for years to bury. My entire childhood had been measured against Malcolm's shadow, though he never once carried the same weight I was expected to bear. When I was 12, I came home with straight A's, the result of nights spent studying under the weak light of a desk lamp. My father barely looked up from his newspaper, offering only a curt nod. The very next week, Malcolm brought home a report card dotted with C's, and Roderick clapped him on the back, saying, "At least you passed. Son." That was the pattern my best was expected, his mediocrity celebrated. After our mother died, the imbalance deepened. She had been the only one who noticed my efforts, who whispered encouragement when I wanted to give up. Without her, the house grew heavier, and my father's gaze sharpened. I was suddenly the one expected to cook, to clean, to take on the quiet roles my mother once filled, while Malcolm roamed freely, shielded by excuses. In high school, I took part-time jobs at the diner down the road, then as a tutor for neighborhood kids. Every dollar I earned went into savings or to help with bills. Meanwhile, Malcolm spent his afternoons on the basketball courts or sprawled on the couch with friends, the television blaring. If chores were left undone, my father would scold me for not keeping up, never turning to Malcolm, who slipped away with a grin. By the time I left for college, I had learned not to expect fairness. Responsibility clung to me like a second skin, while Malcolm floated through life with the unshakable assurance that someone else would always catch him. Those years had carved the truth into me in my father's eyes. One child could do no wrong, and the other could never do enough. The echo of that lesson was what made his words at the dinner table cut so deep. When I stepped into adulthood, I thought I was stepping into freedom. Instead, I found myself chained to the same house that had weighed on me since childhood. The roof leaked one spring, and while Malcolm shrugged and said it was Dad's problem, I was the one who called contractors, balanced estimates, and quietly put the bill on my credit card. When the water heater broke, I dipped into the savings I had been building for graduate school. Travel brochures I once kept tucked in my desk drawer turned into scrap paper for grocery lists. Each sacrifice was folded neatly into the next until I could barely tell where my own dreams ended and duty began. I told myself it was temporary, that once the house was stable, once my father was secure, I would finally take the trip to Italy I'd planned since college, or apply to that master's program in Boston. But each year blurred into the next, and my responsibilities multiplied. Roderick never thanked me. He spoke as if I were simply doing what was expected, keeping his legacy intact. "It's your duty," he said more than once, his tone flat, final. He never once called it a gift, though every payment I made chipped away at my future. Still, I paid, month after month, year after year. I shouldered the mortgage, convinced that one day he would look at me and see not just a daughter, but a woman who had carried our family on her back. I imagined him proud, even if silently, when the debt was gone. What I did not see then was how that pride I longed for had already been given away to a son who had never lifted a single weight. And that truth began to take shape the night Malcolm leaned back in his chair as if he already owned the walls I had fought to keep standing. The night my father decided to make his announcement, the air in the dining room was thick with expectation. He had called for a family dinner, though we both knew what that usually meant. Another performance in which Malcolm was the star and I was the supporting role. The table was set, the roast steaming, the wine poured, but the warmth was only surface deep. Halfway through the meal, Roderick cleared his throat, setting down his glass with a sharp clink. "Now that the house is finally paid off, it's time to do what's best for the family," he declared. His eyes flicked toward Malcolm with something close to pride. "Your brother will be moving in." I froze, fork suspended in the air. Malcolm grinned, stretching lazily as though the house had already bent itself around his comfort. "I'll take the master bedroom," he said, smirking at me. "It's bigger, and I've always liked that view." The words sliced through me. My years of sacrifice were being erased in a single evening, and no one seemed to notice the devastation written across my face. I forced myself to speak, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. "This is my home. I paid for it. Every payment, every repair mine." Roderick waved me off, irritation flashing in his eyes. "Don't get emotional. Ilara, this isn't about you. It's about family." That word family landed like a stone. To him, family meant Malcolm's comfort and my silence. The humiliation burned, but beneath it, a hard calm began to form. I set down my fork, folded my hands, and let the storm of my father's authority crash uselessly against me. Then I leaned forward, meeting his gaze with a steadiness he didn't expect. "Check the deed again," I whispered. The room fell into a stunned quiet, Malcolm's smirk faltering, my father's face paling as though he had just seen the edge of a truth he never wanted to confront. For a long moment, no one moved. My father's knife hovered over his plate, his knuckles white against the handle. Malcolm let out a nervous laugh, the kind he used whenever he thought someone was bluffing. "What's that supposed to mean?" Malcolm asked, his smirk wavering. I drew in a steady breath. "It means the deed isn't in your name, Father. It isn't in Malcolm's name either. It's in mine, solely. I've been the only one making payments, the only one signing papers. This house belongs to me." Roderick slammed his hand against the table, the silverware rattling. "Don't be ridiculous. I was the one who—" His words faltered, and for the first time I saw hesitation cross his face. He hadn't signed a single document. He had left every detail to me, brushing it off as something women were better at handling. Malcolm shifted uneasily. "Dad, she can't be serious." "You said I said what I believed," Roderick snapped, though his voice had lost its usual thunder. His eyes darted toward me, searching for cracks in my composure, but I had none to offer. Calmly, I unfolded the manila envelope I'd carried in my bag since the bank visit. I slid the copy of the deed across the table. My name stared back at them in black ink. Their silence was almost sweet. "You never asked," I said softly. "You assumed, and I let you. Because I thought one day the truth wouldn't matter as much as the family it protected. But I see now it matters more than anything." The weight in the room shifted. For the first time, It wasn't my father dictating terms or Malcolm claiming space he hadn't earned. It was me. Their faces told me they had never truly considered what I had sacrificed, what it had cost to keep this house standing. And in that moment, I knew clarity wasn't enough. The time had come to act, not merely defend. I would not let my years of silence end in another dismissal. The house was mine, and so was the power that came with it. The night after the dinner, I sat at my desk with the deed spread out in front of me. The papers that had once felt like a burden now sharp as a blade. My father's shock replayed in my mind. Malcolm's disbelief echoing like a hollow drum. For years I had been the silent one, the reliable one, the one who never fought back. That part of me was gone. The first call I made was to my lawyer, a patient woman named Ms. Harding who had handled my refinancing paperwork. I explained everything: my father's demand, Malcolm's smug assumption, the threat to uproot me from the home I alone had kept afloat. She didn't sound surprised. "We'll make sure your rights are secured," she said firmly. Within days, she arranged for new locks, ensuring that only my keys would open the doors. We updated every relevant document: utilities, insurance, county records, removing any ambiguity about ownership. Then she suggested something that made my chest feel lighter: a notice of occupancy terms. If my father or brother attempted to move in without my consent, we could issue an official eviction notice backed by the court. The idea of having the law at my side felt like fresh air after years of suffocation. While I moved quietly, my father moved loudly. Neighbors stopped me on the sidewalk with polite but curious smiles, saying they had heard Malcolm would soon be taking over the house. One even asked if I was planning to downsize. I simply smiled. My lips pressed thin and offered no correction. Let them think what they wanted. The truth would arrive soon enough. Back inside the house, I walked through each room, the walls still heavy with years of sacrifice. For the first time, though, I didn't feel trapped. I felt steady. The foundation beneath me wasn't just concrete and wood, it was proof that I had survived, and that I was stronger than they ever imagined. My father believed he had cornered me, that his word was final. What he didn't see was that I had already started moving the pieces, and the board no longer belonged to him. The morning after the paperwork was finalized, I packed a small bag and left before dawn. I wanted space, a breath of distance to let the next step unfold without my presence filling the air. The house was still, the silence almost ceremonial as I closed the door behind me. When the sun rose, Roderick must have expected the familiar sounds of me in the kitchen, the coffee maker bubbling, the rhythm of a home he assumed would always serve him. Instead, the rooms stayed quiet. Malcolm stumbled downstairs, yawning, only to stop cold at the front door. Taped neatly to the glass was the notice, stamped and sealed, declaring in black and white that the property belonged solely to me and that no one had rights to enter, occupy, or alter the residence without my explicit permission. Any attempt to do so would be grounds for legal eviction. I wasn't there to see it, but I could picture the moment Malcolm tugging the paper free, eyes scanning the lines, his confusion growing. "Dad," he must have called, voice breaking with uncertainty. Roderick, still in command in his own mind, would have snatched it away, read it once, twice, then slammed it on the table as if sheer force could make the words vanish. Anger would have followed, rage at being undermined, at realizing the authority he wore like a crown was nothing more than borrowed cloth. Neighbors, drawn by the noise, lingered at the edge of their lawns. Whispers traveled quickly down the street how the proud patriarch had been blindsided, how the daughter no one noticed had quietly taken control. By the time I returned later that evening, the air around the house carried a different weight. The illusion of their dominance had cracked, and all that remained was a silence even louder than their shouting. I signed the lease on the condo without hesitation, the pen gliding smoothly as if it, too, understood what this moment meant. The building stood downtown, glass and steel against the skyline. Nothing like the old house with its sagging porch and heavy curtains. This place was mine, bought with the savings I had guarded in silence, each dollar a quiet rebellion against years of dismissal. The first night I moved in, I unpacked slowly, placing books on shelves in the order I preferred, choosing bold colors for the walls instead of the muted tones my father had always insisted were respectable. A small reading nook overlooked the city, the hum of life outside a reminder that I was finally a part of something bigger than the endless cycle of sacrifice. Freedom seeped into the corners of my days. I joined a book club at a local cafe, where conversations spilled past the pages into laughter and stories I'd never dared to share before. Colleagues I had drifted from during the long years of responsibility reappeared, and I allowed myself dinners, late-night walks, and the simple joy of belonging without judgment. What struck me most was the quiet, not the suffocating silence of my father's house, heavy with expectation, but a peace that felt earned. No one barged into my space demanding explanations. No one dismissed my work as meaningless. Each morning, I brewed coffee and opened my laptop in the sunlit kitchen, answering to no one but myself. For the first time, I wasn't just the daughter who carried the family's burdens. I was a Lara reader, professional, friend, woman without apology. And while I was learning how to breathe again, the phone began to ring, carrying the familiar number I had once answered without hesitation. The first time I answered, his voice was already breaking. Roderick didn't bother with pleasantries, just launched into a torrent of complaints. The roof was leaking again. The utility bills were piling up, and Malcolm, after weeks of promises, still hadn't found a job. The house I had held together for years was unraveling without my hands to patch its cracks. "You need to come back," he barked, the authority in his tone worn thin but still clinging to its old shape. "Out of respect for this family, you need to step up. This is your responsibility." I sat in silence, the weight of his words sliding off me like rain against glass. My mind replayed every moment I had been dismissed, every sacrifice belittled as nothing more than duty. When he paused, waiting for my agreement, I let the quiet stretch. Then I said, evenly, "It's not my problem." The line went dead silent, and I knew he hadn't expected defiance. I could almost picture the red flush rising across his face. Somewhere behind him, I heard Malcolm's muffled voice, raised in argument. Roderick snapped back, and within seconds, the two of them were shouting over one another. Malcolm accused him of lying, of failing to prepare. Roderick accused Malcolm of wasting his life, of being nothing but a drain. The unity they had once wielded against me had splintered, turned inward, jagged and bitter. Their fortress of entitlement was collapsing from within, and for the first time, I felt no urge to rescue it. When the call ended, I set the phone down, the echo of their fighting fading into nothing, and turned back to the quiet of my own life, where peace waited patiently for me to claim it. The condo had become more than a place to live. It was proof that I could exist outside the shadow of obligation. Each morning, I woke without the heaviness of someone else's demands pressing against my chest. I worked. I read, I laughed, and the silence that once suffocated me had transformed into something gentle, something chosen. One Sunday, I drove to the cemetery, the air cool and still. My mother's name was etched into the headstone, worn from years of weather, but the sight of it never failed to steady me. I knelt, brushing away leaves, and let the words I had carried for so long finally find their place. I kept the house standing as long as I could, for you. But I know now, love isn't proven by sacrifice alone. Dignity matters too, and that will be my legacy. I stayed there for a while, letting the quiet settle, imagining her smile if she could see the woman I had become, not bowed, not silenced, but unafraid to walk away. Back in the city, life moved forward. Neighbors waved, friends called, and I discovered new routines that belonged entirely to me, Roderick and Malcolm. I heard, remained in the crumbling house of their own making, arguing, blaming, sinking under the weight of entitlement they could no longer sustain. I did not resent them anymore. I simply let them go. The chains they had fastened to me had dissolved, and in their place was something stronger than walls or deeds. A house paid in full means nothing if respect is still owed. I paid for both, and only one remains mine.